Neale Donald Walsch. It's such a great honor to have you with us, Neale.
Well, golly, aren't those nice words for you to say to me? And I'm not so sure how big the honor is, but it's lovely for you to have asked me to be on the program, and I thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Yes, we really appreciate your being here to share your wisdom with us. So first, how does someone become happier than God?
Well, first, by realizing that you can be. That is, and the phrase happier than God merely means as happy as you could possibly imagine being.
Mm-hmm.
I picked up the phrase from a friend of mine who was describing a mutual acquaintance of ours. But my friend was saying that this lady had lots of money. And I said, really? I wasn't aware of that. She doesn't show it. How much money does she have? And my friend said, oh, she's got more money than God. And I immediately, it's kind of a humorous way of saying she's really, really wealthy.
Mm-hmm.
So when I heard her say she got more money than God, I realized that using that kind of a description was kind of a clever way of saying an amount larger than you could possibly imagine.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided to turn that phrase around and call this business about how happy can you be? You can be happier than God.
Mm-hmm.
And the first step in actually being so tremendously happy would be, as I said, to notice that you can be. And that is a change of paradigm for many people.
Mm-hmm.
That is, many people think that life, in fact, was not even intended to be happy.
Mm-hmm.
That the purpose of life was to be a test or a proving ground
Mm-hmm.
or some kind of a trial or a tribulation, or at the very least some kind of a journey or process that's very, very difficult to undertake and to move forward on, and that we are having to somehow meet certain requirements that life and the universe and God, if you will, place before us. And if we do all those things well, then we might have at least a halfway decent life, although you can certainly expect a great deal of trouble and a great deal of difficulty along the way. And then it's not even guaranteed that having finished all of that you're going to have a wonderful afterlife. That's not guaranteed. It depends on whether you've done what God wants. And even that isn't clear, because we don't know what God wants, except if we belong to a particular religion, and who knows which is the right religion, because there are as many religions as there are hairs on your head. So we have a problem that seems to be just unable to be solved, because we don't have all the data in about any of these things. What is it that God wants, and what is the test all about anyway? Along comes conversations with God to tell us that all of those assumptions that I've just mentioned are false assumptions. Every single one of them. That there's nothing that God wants, nothing we have to be, do, or have in order to...
what would God want?
Exactly. Precisely. And there's nothing that we have to be, do, or have in order to gain entry into heaven. And for that matter, there is no test that's being administered here on earth. Life is not a trial. Life is not a tribulation. Life is not a proving ground. Well, that opens up other questions. If that's so, then what is life? And the answer is that life is simply an opportunity and an invitation from life itself. That life invites life to express more life through the process of life itself.
The experience.
This is a process that I call God-godding. And so, excuse me, that should be a fairly simple and a fairly wonderful process. It doesn't have to be a process that is a tribulation, and it doesn't have to be a process that's terribly complicated or difficult to understand. That's why I wrote the book Happier Than God, to see if we couldn't open up some of those communications, some of those conversations.
So what you're describing, what I'm hearing you say, is that we've had a paradigm of being other-referred rather than self-referred. Is that what you're...
That's certainly one of the problems. We have two problems, two basic fundamental spiritual problems. You've nailed one of them. I think there's another one. We also have an idea that we are somehow separate from God, which is what causes the problem of being other-referred. We imagine that we live within a paradigm of separation. We're separate from God, separate in a sense from life itself, separate from each other for sure, and separate from all that is. That we are just looking at a system that is comprised of a bunch of individual separated entities, codependent for sure, but separated nonetheless. That understanding is inaccurate. And as soon as we change our ideas about how life really is
Mm-hmm.
and the nature of things,
Mm-hmm.
then we begin to no longer be other referred because we realize there is no other.
But do you think this is just a part of evolution as we incarnate as God,
Yes.
so to speak?
Yes. I think that in all beginning cultures of sentient beings, and ours is certainly a beginning culture of
Mm-hmm.
sentient beings for certain. In all beginning, if not to say primitive cultures of sentient beings, there is this misunderstanding.
Mm-hmm.
This misunderstanding does not exist in the more mature
Mm-hmm.
cultures of
Mm-hmm.
sentient beings that there are found everywhere in the universe. But we're a
Mm-hmm.
very young culture,
Mm-hmm.
only a few 100,000 years old, as opposed to cultures that have existed for millions of years.
Mm-hmm. So, could we speak a little bit about the Conversations with book 1 that was published in 1995?
Sure.
How did your Conversations with God come about?
Well, I was moving through a very difficult time in my life, a time when nothing was working for me.
Mm-hmm.
My relationship with my significant other was falling apart. My career had reached a dead end. Even my health
Mm-hmm.
was going downhill.
Yes, I saw the movie, so your movie, and
Yes.
I think it probably just had the highlights, and
Yes.
yeah, there was a lot more space in between than
Yes.
maybe was conveyed in the movie.
Yeah, but as you know from the film, I wound up as a result of all of that, on the streets looking for work,
Mhm.
and I couldn't
Mhm.
find work, and then I wound up
Mhm.
living on the street because I couldn't find work,
Mm-hmm.
and so I wound up as a street person
Mm-hmm.
in my life, and it was a difficult, challenging period of my life
Mhm.
of almost a year, just 2 weeks shy of a year,
Mm-hmm.
and so at the end of that time, I finally got back off the streets. I found a little job at a local radio station in the town where I live, and I was back in the swing of things, so to speak. And that's really when I realized the vacuousness of all of life, because I thought, my gosh, if this is all there is, I mean, just get up, go to work, come home, get up, go to work, come home. There must be something more that I don't simply understand here
Mhm.
about life and the
Mhm.
reason for all of it being the way
Nobody
it is.
gave you a rule book, huh?
Nobody gave me a book, and I asked for one. And so that's how the conversation started. I
Mhm.
woke up in the middle of the night, and I really felt like I needed to get some answers, or I didn't want to play anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And so I began to write out an angry letter to God. What does it take to make life work?
Mm-hmm.
What have I done to deserve a life of such continuing struggle? And
Mhm.
somebody give me that rule book.
Mm-hmm.
I'll play, just tell me what the rules are.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you were ready to surrender to having a relationship with something higher than your own self.
I'm not sure it was about surrender so much as it was about demanding. I was, I recall vividly the moment. Either you give me some answers here, or I'm out of here.
Yeah.
And I was very, very, very much ready
Yeah.
to put an end to my physical existence because
Mhm.
I just wasn't having any fun at all.
But the only thing that would separate you from God would be some part of yourself, don't you think, Neale?
Well, that's of course a higher thought that people don't have when they're feeling very frustrated.
Yeah.
That's fundamentally true, but when you're
Yeah.
angry, frustrated, and looking for answers, you don't think that clearly.
Yeah.
At least I didn't.
Yeah. Yeah. So is God talking to everyone all the time?
Of course, that's the whole point of the books. Every one of the 9 books in the Conversations with God series makes that point. It's not about an individual messenger. It's not about a specific person. It's about all people all the time.
Mhm.
And that God is communicating with all of us in every single moment of our lives in 1,000 different ways across 100 lifetimes in 1,000,000 moments.
Mhm.
All we have to do is open our eyes and open our ears and be aware.
Mhm. Well, so how do we hear the voice of God, Neale, and how do we know it's God who's talking to us?
Well, we hear the voice of God in just the way I just said. We open our eyes, we open our ears so that we can hear. That is, we pay attention to what's going on.
Okay.
We pay attention to what's happening around us,
Mhm.
to what's being said, what's occurring, what's being brought to our attention, as an example, and to just being aware of our life as it's moving past us, as it's moving.
So would you say you're looking beyond the appearance of things, or?
Or perhaps looking more deeply into the appearance of things, rather than looking beyond it, but looking really deeply into the appearance of things and asking some fundamental questions about all the events of our lives from day to day and from moment to moment. After a while, this becomes a habit. It feels like a lot of mental work at first, but after a while, a person begins to live this way, and a